All right. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Dashboard Dojo. We thought we'd try something a little different in this dojo session. There's so many people that I've met over the years that just know a ton about the data model or about reports or dashboards or formulas or other analytics tools that I thought to, this idea of, having wandering itinerant masters stop by the dojo occasionally. And I couldn't think of a better person to have join us than Ezra Kenigsberg, who I've known since, was it 10th grade that you showed up in high school?
Would have been 1980.
Yeah. Well, that's great. All right. So today in the dojo, I'll just do some quick introductions, and we've got Ezra joining us. I really like that picture, Ezra. Nice Cape Cod baseball hat. We'll talk just for a little bit about summer 22. There's so much more in there than I expected. In fact, there was so much in there for reports and dashboards and formulas that I thought we should do the next dojo session just on the summer 22 release, which is kind of rare to do a single release having that much stuff, but I know we can fill the session. We'll talk a little bit about some upcoming OpFocus events and training. We'll talk about the topics we have, and we'll take Q&A. This is not as formal as a webinar seems. Please go ahead and chat questions if you have them during the session. Thank you, Kyle, for hosting us again, and really so pleased to have Ezra join us. Before we get started, so a little bit about myself. My name is David Carnes. I'm the chairman and chief evangelist of OpFocus. Proud to be a Salesforce MVP. Thought to share something about myself each session, and this is Toby, who we just brought home a couple weeks ago. He will probably start whining in the crate in the other room during the session. So OpFocus, we're a team of about 80 spread out across the US and Canada. We've been partners with Salesforce since 2006. We work with SaaS companies to optimize revenue operations. And if this is your first time to the dojo, welcome. The idea behind the dojo, I lived in Japan for 3 years, and I love this concept of the dojo just being a place to learn the way. And what I really loved about it is people of all different levels going to master the art of something and being able to share ideas and experiences with each other. So we have lots of recordings. We have about 30 hours of recordings on the dashboarddojo.com on the recordings tab. Our most recent session is posted on the site as well. We did a session on dashboard makeovers. All right, well, Ezra, you haven't seen this photo in a while, but so senior year, so back in high school, we had this little book that was given out at the beginning of each year, and we literally called it the Facebook. So this is long before Facebook, but there, the 1,000 or 1,100 students or so, there'd be photos, and these are our 2 photos from our senior year. So I thought that was a fun way to kick us off. Ezra is the chief Salesforce architect at Big Commerce, based in Austin. Ezra is one of my favorite people. I saw Ezra speak at Dreamforce, must have been 2006 or 2007, Ezra, when you
back that far, yeah.
So Ezra was a data architect at Salesforce, probably the first data architect I ever met, and then from there became an enterprise architect for Dell on their massive Salesforce implementation. But why don't I turn off the camera and we'll just dive in. So Ezra, can you describe the architect role? That's a very specialized role. Not only are you the architect, but a chief architect. So
yeah.
Tell us what that is.
I think mostly that was my manager just wanting to make me happy. Chief just sounded distinctive. The way I've come into the role is very improvisational. Basically, just kind of previous jobs I started out as, it's a little fancy to say I was an economist. I think I was more like a spreadsheet jockey, but just found I was enjoyed much more playing with the computer than I did, the economic analysis, and just kept kind of gravitating more and more towards IT solutions in everything I did. And so exactly as you described, when I joined Salesforce back in 2005, I was actually a consultant. And I carved out that role for myself. I just said, I'm a data architect. It wasn't really anyone permitted me to do. Formally said, that's your title. I just said, that's what I'm doing. And so it's from there. So exactly as you described, I worked at Salesforce doing data architecture work. So I was an architect, and that led to working at Dell as an enterprise architect to Austin, Texas. Or excuse me, I moved to Austin with Dell, and then have worked to .coms since our voice and your original question. What is it about the role? A picture with detailed capability is how I describe it. I'm hard pressed to imagine a Salesforce solution architect or data architect or chief Salesforce architect who doesn't have the experience of having done, the problem solving that goes with Salesforce. I haven't gotten that foundation. I didn't get to that kind of high level. So I would imagine most people, lots of Salesforce admins come from the world of having been like sales ops people or admins. And I'd say this is analogous. It's just, an interest in data led more towards architecture, led more towards architecting for the organizations I've worked.
Yeah, cool. And so your current organization, you have 3 architects total on your team, and you have is it a few thousand employees now?
It's about
1,000. Okay, very cool. You did a program in analytics recently, and I remember you being really excited about this. Tell us about that program.
Sure. So it's a company called Trilogy. They do these data analytics boot camp in collaboration with universities all over the country. So I did it in Austin. And it was a terrific 6-month, throw you into the deep end immersion in the technology that I don't typically work with in my day-to-day. It gets really administering or Salesforce just on the stuff right. And the data boot camp was a chance to stretch my legs and expose to more stuff out there. Ironically, I recapitulated what I had already known from the past, which was, actually, the analysis of the numbers, kind of interesting, but I really dig the technology. So I got really into Python. I got really into these crazy libraries, the interaction between coding and Salesforce. That's where the excitement was for me. But it was still a real useful immersion.
And I think I've said for years when teaching our admin class, reports and dashboards is great. I spent a lot of time talking about reports. However, that is just one little baby foot mold of analytics. And if I fantasize about taking, that was what, a 9-month course that you did? 6. If I fantasize about taking a 6 course, what I think about is being introduced to concepts and words that I don't have in my grasp right now. Like I'll come up with a situation where I want to accomplish this thing in reporting, and I know that there's going to be some challenge. The data is this way, and I need it this way, and I don't have the words to describe what I'm frustrated with.
Is I believe the word you were looking for there.
Well, yes, I'm comfortable with the word transpose, but thank you for teasing me. So, thinking about skills or staying on the topic of skills, like you've been reporting for many, many years. You've used a lot of tools. I'm sure going back to the Excel connector way back when, and in Excel, pulling data and writing VBA. What most valuable, or what skill has been the most valuable to you in reporting?
I always start with the same place with this avenue of questioning, which is Excel, or I guess now really Google Sheets is proving itself every bit a match to Excel. But get good at spreadsheets, because people who can work well with data in spreadsheets start building the muscles for working reports well. And report well, then you build dashboards on top of that. So many people really only use spreadsheets as a place to kind of hold text. And it blows my mind. I mean, it's testament to the fact that the spreadsheet was truly the first killer app. And I encourage anybody who's being asked to work with data in Salesforce, go ahead, grab it down, put it in a spreadsheet and transpose it. Make formulas, work with the data in a spreadsheet and get good at spreadsheet functions, for instance. You know, all the field formulas, all those functions that you see in Salesforce, those are all Excel spreadsheet. So Excel skill interacts with reporting and dashboard skill really well.
So when we were boys, before the app exchange existed, we kind of needed to be super clever using a tool like the Excel, which is an ancient Excel-based tool that allowed you to take report results out of Salesforce, pull that data into Excel directly, and then, you know, it was like the early days of OpFocus, we would write VBA code that would sift through that data, parse it, and then we, you know, at the time, there's so many limitations in Excel, you know, over the years, how complex we could get, but we pushed it to its limit, reporting directly in Excel and automating that. So somebody could open an Excel file, log into the Excel connector, click a button, and it would pull in reports results and then format them. And then Crystal Reports became an option and was, you know, but we need, so now we've got a whole plethora of tools. I think, you know, probably one of the big things I hope for everybody that's on the call today, Salesforce, is just to know that there are these BI tools out there that are much more sophisticated, and I hope you have access to one. Like, I love reports and dashboards, but I want everyone to have access to a bigger boy tool, a BI tool.
Yeah, no, totally. That's the in much the same way that every year at Dreamforce they have the True to the Core session, and Shauna Wolverton, the PM, she talks about the declarative cliff. You know, the fact that you can build stuff with point and click configuration in Salesforce, and then at some point you run out of point and click and you need code. And Salesforce has been working very hard for years now to kind of push that cliff further out. They want to make it so that more and more admins, more and more architects can do stuff with declarative. In much the same way, Excel can be that kind of a crutch where if you get too enamored of spreadsheets, you might not learn about the world of databases. So exactly back to your previous point, one of the things I wanted to do with my data boot camp was do some hard work. I'm now a big Postgres fan, which is way more big boy pants than you know, my longtime affinity for Microsoft Access. The databases that can really process, you know, tons and tons of data are the things that you can start looking at once you're dealing with huge data volumes.
Yeah, I know this will be you know, like a double-edged question. I'll ask it two different ways. So I'm curious about features, and specifically with reports and dashboards, since we're in the dashboard dojo. Is there a feature that you like best about Salesforce reports and dashboards?
The one I love is the scheduling capability, and in particular the specifying of a threshold. Something I've implemented a lot at previous companies and as well at Big Commerce is an exception report. So if some record falls through the cracks, I'll create a report that would show, hey, here are all the records that fell through the cracks, and maybe give it, you know, some kind of a time span, like, oh, it's only looking for ones created yesterday. And
so another example of that would be open opportunities with a close date in the past, and you'd set the threshold if there's more than 0 of them, that, you know, because those are bad. It throws off your pipeline reporting and forecasting.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
And a wonderful foreshadowing of something I'm going to be talking about.
Oh, good. Okay. All right, good. All right.
I'll give you your $20 later. Thank you.
So in Lightning, they've combined those two features from Classic, the subscription and the scheduling, and combined them into one, just calling it subscriptions. Each user can subscribe to 5 reports and subscribe to 5 dashboards. Within the reports, they've combined those, allowing us to set those thresholds, which is great. Yeah. I'm always curious how often these things are used. Like, I'd love to be a fly on the wall when they, the product team, analyzes what's being used or not, because I have my hunches. All right, let's, you and I have geeked out late night on formulas many times over the years. How did you get started writing formulas? I think this is it's such a big, useful thing for being a reporting. And I sort of think it like separates sort of mere mortals from the reporting gods. Like, you have to have the ability to write formulas, have to. How did you get started writing formulas?
Spreadsheets, baby. I first did spreadsheet work in the summer of 1992 using Lotus 123 version 2 on a DOS machine.
Was that on a mainframe?
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, but I mean, again, the long story short is work with spreadsheets. That's how I got started. That's how I learned to make formulas. Originally in Lotus and then in Excel, and all of that experience and capability lent itself really well to Salesforce formulas.
Yeah, great. So that sounds like a great tip. Any other tips for people? So start in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other tips?
Boy, a zillion. Look at my old bloggy stuff. I've put tons and tons of ideas about getting the most value from formulas, and I'm transferring. I did that on an old Google site. I'm bringing that over to a WordPress now. Specifically, again, the foreshadowing is just phenomenal. Thank you, Dave. I'm going to specifically talk a little bit today about last activity and its shortcomings and how we can get around that. Yeah, I would. So tips about working with formulas. Comments are a terrific idea. With a slash and a star, you can put something in it and then a star and a slash, to close your comment just the way you would in Apex code. That can provide a lot of insight when your formulas get pretty hairy. Using returns smartly, just formatting the whole thing in a way such that somebody, even yourself, coming to it a year later might be able to better understand what it is you've written.
I feel like, I don't know if I'm, I'm certainly not, like obsessive, but if I see a formula that is all jammed together, I will just instinctively start formatting it so that I can read it.
Yeah.
I do find that really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
One of the strange things that's not really well known about formulas in Salesforce, years and years ago, they tripled the amount of written formula characters,
yeah,
but they kept the complexity limit the same.
Yeah.
And just this year, just recently, they've now tripled the complexity limit as well. So we can now write very, very complex formulas. I've only bumped up against that limit probably once. I imagine you've probably hit that limit many more times.
Yeah, I used to hit so we're talking about the 5,000 compiled character limit that's now 15,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny because sadly I'm out of the formula game mostly. So I used to crash up against the 5,000 compiled character limit a lot. And there are little tricks you can do to get around that, like, hey, write some automation to take the value from one field and slap it into a different field and then have different formula logic that works on that.
You wonder if one of the biggest impacts of having the 15,000 now, so in the past you'd think, oh, I could just write another formula that references that formula, but you inherit the complexity. Right. And you wonder now if you're writing formulas that reference other formula fields now that you've got an easier time of it. Mm-hmm. So that threshold is 3 times higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
what? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just thinking about, so Sherry, who's on the call, we were looking at a dashboard of hers in the last session, and I'm pretty sure she had last activity, was using the last activity field. And this is one of those fields, sort of a dirty secret in the Salesforce world, is the last activity field isn't what you think it is. And this is what you're going to talk about and demo a formula to solve the last activity challenge. Can you describe the problem with the last activity field? I feel like I have vague memories of, it showing open activities and things like that, dates in the future and things that don't make sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, basically Salesforce, I'm sure somebody, had a terribly noble intention when they implemented this, because it, last activity, it's one of those, it's sort of a magical field. If I look at my account fields, right, or my opportunity fields, I don't see last activity listed even as a standard field there. And it sounds, hey, last activity is very much the kind of thing that a salesperson wants to keep track of. Hey, what was the last activity done on this customer? What was the last activity done on this potential deal? And so they'll add last activity to, a report.
Yeah.
Yeah. The canonical thing I imagine is me as a sales rep. I've got a list of all my customers, and I'm going to use last activity to see, I haven't talked to that guy in 2 weeks. I better get in touch with him. Or similarly, my sales manager might keep track of all his or her reps with a spreadsheet, that's got, or excuse me, with a report that's got last activity, and kind of say, okay, that one's good, that one's good. Nope, Ezra hasn't talked to that customer in 3 weeks. He better get on it. And the problem is, last activity behaves very much in a way that isn't what you want. I'll get into the details of it, but I'll leave it at this. Last activity can be in the future.
Yes. Do you want to just dive into that while we're talking about it?
Sure. There we go. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
All right, very cool. All right. Rearrange things a little bit here.
And that's your blog, Kudo Tech?
Yes. Thank you. And I got owe you another $20. Yeah, so kudotech.com is where I'm blogging. And this specific presentation can be found at bit.ly/lastacti. I believe I posted that in the chat already. I was a little surprised to see it didn't seem to be working for bit.ly/lastacti. Those should be synonymous. But
yeah, Kyle just dropped them into the chat as well.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Okay, so yes, anyway, kudotech.com is where I'm building my new blog up from the ashes of the old one, and bit.ly/lastacti is where you can find this presentation. Okay, so what are we talking about? Exactly as you described, the last activity field, and I'm breaking it down into, what a business need would be for it, why last activity doesn't satisfy that, and how I propose fixing it. And this is all declarative, no third-party stuff. You're not paying anybody for anything. Okay, so what's the need is this, very common question that a sales manager might be asking, or a sales rep might be asking is, hey, when was the last time somebody worked this record? And if by worked, you mean, well, had an activity completed on it, you might think that last activity is what you're looking for. Before we dive too far into it, let's remember there are other ways we could think of working a record. We could think about, well, what was the last time the record itself was last modified? Or we could think about when Salesforce might have touched it in some way. And we know that that's typically handled through Salesforce's last modified date, or when a record itself was actually, edited and saved, or system mod stamp, which is frequently aligned with last modified date, but also can be updated when something like a value rolls up to a record from a child record. That might update the system mod stamp without modifying the last modified date. You'll notice
I feel like you've just gone to a depth that I am nowhere near that level. so that you're saying that there are two last modifieds. One is at the system level, the other is the last modified.
Yeah, well, I mean, it calls it system mod stamp. It's you know, fairly Salesforce-y kind of inside baseball thing. But you know, hey, we're digging deep into what's the last time something happened. And so I wanted to distinguish last activity, which is, you know, focused on events and tasks, and these two other things, the last modified date, which people are generally familiar with, and system mod stamp, which is a little more inside baseball. There isn't, you can't show system mod stamp in a report, but it's available to you, you know, as an API field. Okay, so stepping back, not worrying about last modified, not worrying about system mod stamp. This is what I imagine somebody might be asking for. You know, when was the last time this record was worked? Again, here's a spreadsheet. I think one of the terrific tools for working with stakeholders, your customers, your people inside your own organization, is to mock up spreadsheets. When they say, hey, we need a report that does XYZ, make a spreadsheet and say, do you want it to look like this? And then with back and forth, you might revise it. And so exactly as we described, I, as a sales rep, might keep current on, you know, which of my customers I've been in touch with, which ones I need to get back in touch with. Or a manager overseeing sales reps might say, hey, it looks like Ezra hasn't reached out to, you know, Burlington since January. He should get on that. So that last activity field, that would seem to be what you want. Or for any fans of the movie Tombstone, that would be your Huckleberry. Well, Val Kilmer's in the Top Gun movie. There you go. I'm very cutting edge. Here's the problem, or rather, let me go through why last activity seems to be the right thing. It's a standard field that you can see on, you know, lots of your standard objects like lead account, contact, opportunity, and case. You can see it in reports. If I just run a simple report on case, hey, there's last activity. There's only the one small problem. Oh, actually, I can't even hide it. Last activity cannot be hidden from users. It's one thing that drives me crazy. But there's one.
No field level security. It's not a field in the list. It's really a system thing.
Yes.
So we just can't even hide it. Yes.
And so this is why I feel a little crazy about it. My problem with it is it's terrible. It is most emphatically not my Huckleberry. Let's go through it. What is it? Last activity, it has the API name, last activity date. And as I mentioned, you know, it can occur in the future, and it's highly gameable. If I were to say, run my organization and say, hey, the good sales reps are the ones who are keeping their last activity dates fresh, and sales reps who need to do better work are the ones who have bad last activity dates, I might be fooling myself. If we look at that report, so remember we looked a couple screens back at that Excel mock-up I created. You know, this is a report that you could make in Salesforce, and you might get something that looks like this, and you look at that and you say, hey, that's terrific. Now I know when was the last time people touched these accounts. But you could just as easily get something like this. Let's say somebody fat-fingered a due date on a task they were working, or perhaps on an event that they were scheduling with a customer. So instead of writing 2022, they wrote 2222.
Or 2024. That's just that whole thing that a last could be in the future is baffling.
Yeah, yeah. So what's going on here? Well, the good people at Salesforce, they do make fantastic documentation. I'll give them that. And what they say is that last activity documents the date when a user last did something related to the record, and it represents one of the following. This is verbatim. This is straight from Salesforce's help. The bolding is mine. They say it's either the latest due date of the closed tasks on that record or the latest start date of events on that record. I want to emphasize that. Let's drop everything else away and think about what we're talking about here. So talking about, say, an account. Underneath it, you might have tasks and events that are related to it. And what they're saying is the due date of closed tasks or the start date of any event. And it's going to take the latest of all of this. Why is this a problem? Well, because exactly as you described, Dave, I might create an event in the future. Hey, I'm going to be meeting with them in 2 weeks. I created an event for it. That's nice, but Salesforce then calls that last activity. Or let's say I had something I was assigned to do. My boss told me, Ezra, I want you to talk to United Oil and Gas by the end of July. Well, what if I complete it today? I might preserve that old due date, end of July, mark it closed, and then, oh, foop, what do you know? But the due date of that closed task is what shows up as the last activity. So last activity can get screwed up by a task. Last activity can get screwed up by an event. So what are we going to do to fix it? Well, in the case of tasks, there's another system field called completed date time that we can use instead. In the case of events, we can restrict ourselves to looking at started events. The way Salesforce distinguishes between open activities and activity history when it comes to an event is that once an event starts, once we pass its start date and time, it passes from open activities into activity history. So what I recommend is making a field kind of like this. If you don't have administrative oversight on your org, ask your admin to look at my wonderful article and create a field like this. So let's walk through the logic. And here we see a little bit of formatting going on. You know, this is a activity custom field that's saying, hey, is this activity a task? If it is a task, return the completed date time for that task. Alternately, if it isn't a task, let's enter another if. If the activity date time, that is the start date for what would be an event, remember we're in the else part of our first if statement. If the activity date time, the start date time of my event precedes right now, well then return the activity date time. Otherwise return a null. And so this field, a formula field I call date time marked complete, will show only a task's completed date time or the start date time of an event if it's in the past. So that's where most of the goodness is.
So I would have figured this would have been pages long to solve this, but you've solved it in 1, 2, 3, 5 lines.
Yeah. Well, it's not as simple as that because this is a formula that sits on the activity itself. We really want to get this up to the account or the opportunity or the case or whatever the heck it is where you want to know, hey, what's the latest date time marked complete of all the activities I have? And here's the thing where you run into the problem that activity is not a master detail relationship to any of those objects. It's lookup, right? So you can't use a roll-up summary field.
And it's not even a regular lookup. It's that bizarre related to.
Yes, it's polymorphic. It's weird.
Polymorphic.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite words ever. Again, another $20 to you for letting me uncork the fancy pants vocabulary. So we need some other way of rolling it up. You can do this with code. You can do this with flow. But I wanted to show a cool trick you can use that's even pointier and clickier than flow, which is leveraging reports. So what I do here, and I'm not going to go through the full blow by blow here, but basically we create that field, that one called date time marked complete. I create two other formula fields that kind of help out here. One is called has date time marked complete. And this is just, it's a dummy checkbox. And then a field called days since marked complete. You might say, Ezra, why do you need those? So glad you asked. What we're going to do is we're going to create a custom summary formula on a report. You know, when you do those things where you get the max, or you get the min, or you get the sum, when you're creating a custom summary formula on a report. Unfortunately, you can't do a max and a min with a date in a custom summary formula.
So we can do it with a roll-up summary field, but not
Yes.
within a summary formula. Isn't that nuts?
It seems like exactly the kind of thing they should have fixed when they went to Lightning, but oy. Okay. Anyway, so what we're doing basically is we're taking that date time marked complete. Let me flash back to that for just a moment. So again, we are solving the problem of tasks in the future, or tasks with due dates in the future, by just looking at completed date time. And we're solving the problem of events in the future by only looking at those events where the activity date time precedes this moment right now.
And
so
this
those
is a
two
custom
things.
formula field on the activity object.
That's a custom formula field on the activity object. And then what we're doing basically is turning that date into a number of days ago. And then that number of days ago can be surfaced in a custom summary formula in a report. So here in a report, I'm creating a formula called days since last activity marked complete. I use this capitalization, that marked, to make a real impression on my customers. Whenever they say, hey, I made a report with last activity and it's all broken, I say, that's because last activity is terrible. Please don't use it. Instead, use my formulas that seem to be shouting at you a little bit. It creates a visual cue for them to go, oh, wait, Ezra told me about that. I got to use the thing that says marked with all capitals, because that's what I want. And anything that just says last activity, beware, beware. So when you do something like that, you can get something like this. So here we've got that report. It can have your nice little record count, and we're bubbling up in a custom summary formula on the report the number of days since its last activity was marked complete. So if my sales manager boss were looking at my work, he would say, hey, Ezra, you need to get on the stick with Express Logistics. You haven't talked to them in almost half a year. And again, yeah, that shortcoming we saw, that custom summary formulas, I should have said custom summary formulas. Custom summary formulas don't return dates. So we had to turn this into a number of days ago. And that's how I can get my workaround for last activity. All right, why don't we see the chat? Looks like some folks have lit things up.
I think it's about a copy and paste issue. We're just trying to help Crystal sort out why she can't copy and paste within the Zoom chat. So I love seeing creative use of formulas. So like formulas solve problems. They just absolutely solve problems. I've got two quick thoughts. So in the summer release, we now have the ability to use median. So in our summary actions, whether it's a summary formula or when we're just summarizing an individual column on a report in Lightning, we have that fifth choice now. So we can sum, min, max, average, and we have the ability to use the median, which is super cool. The other thing that you and I were talking about recently is Salesforce snuck in a whole bunch of extra functions. So functions do the heavy lifting in formulas, and now Salesforce has given us And these are kind of obscure, but they're ones that we've had in Excel for years and years, and we just haven't had in Salesforce. So I think we must be creeping up closer to about 100 functions available when you create a custom formula field in Salesforce, and then that ability to write 3 times as much. So if anyone has a question about the last activity solve, this has been a problem forever, unfortunately, with that last activity field, and Salesforce just doesn't advertise it. So I think, Ezra, you've said you wouldn't run your business on the last activity field. I don't think I would do it for my business either. Oh, Crystal asked the question, Ezra, do you have a page that has a list of your most used and complex formulas? I feel like you've blogged about this stuff before. So EzraKenigsberg.com.
Yeah.
Super cool.
And in particular, the triple dub points at my old site, and without the triple dub, it points at my new site. So the place where I have all this stuff, let me log out of my company's org. I don't think they would much appreciate me showing customer data in a Dōjō.
Thank you for doing this on the spot.
Oh, sure. So with Salesforce Inspector, you get a second little hidden pop-out guy on the right-hand edge of your screen. And it enables all sorts of crazy insight into data. So, just in my demo org here, notice here that the normal little arrow still exists. I can still go and view fields and all that jazz. But I now have, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
But I now have a second one as well. This is Salesforce Inspector. And this does all sorts of crazy things. So for instance, if I hit show all data right here, boom, it's just given me a listing of every field value for everything on this particular record. So the account number and the annual revenue and all these silly things that I've put in it, stuff about the billing address and all that jazz. And I love that it's done that alongside. I love that it's done it alongside not only the UI label for the field, but it's done it alongside the API name for the field and the field type. It's real powerful. Coming back, some of the other Salesforce Inspector things. It has some cool stuff with downloading metadata and messing with the API. I remember seeing some feature here that let me create poor man's ERD or poor man's ERDs as well, which I really got a kick out of. I've gone and forgotten exactly where it was, so I'll invite everyone else to go fiddle with this. But
okay, I just put that in the chat, the link to the Chrome extension.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, super cool. I said super cool. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, great. Well, we've got a few moments. If there are any additional questions for Ezra, I'll jump back and take the screen, but please go ahead and type your questions if you have any. I did think to share, I think I might have shared this in our last session. For the Salesforce admin blog, I wrote an article on data analysis as I think it was a 14-part series on skills that are useful to be an admin. And I shared some of my own journey and areas around data analysis that might be helpful. There was one other thing I thought to share around the summer release. I kind of couldn't believe it as I was reviewing the release notes. There's a lot there in the summer 22. So our next Dōjō session will just be 100% focused on the summer 22 release. One of the cool things you can see over here on the right, there's a new tab that it's a checkbox to enable the beta, and it's a unified analytics tab. And now we kind of had that on the reports tab in Classic for the last few years of Classic. But now in Lightning, we have this analytics tab that we can enable that allows you to see all reports, all dashboards, all folders. You can see your favorites. And if you also use CRM Analytics, the old Einstein Analytics, you can see that all unified the same. So we can see that here in this screenshot on the right. We've got a couple of events. Well, next week we've got a webinar. My screenshot's not great. Sorry about that. But you know, when we work with a lot of SaaS companies, when they merge SaaS companies together, there's so many interesting challenges with bringing the Salesforce instances together. So 2 folks on our team, Jim Parker, and well, Kyle will be on the call as well. And we have a special guest, Susan Whittemore, these guys are super knowledgeable. This is next week on June 16th at 1 o'clock. And you can sign up for that on the OpFocus site, just on the events page. I'm teaching next week. I've got a 5-day admin class. We still have some seats available. I'll also be teaching a 2-day hands-on reporting workshop, June 27th and 28th. And I mentioned the July 13th session. So the next Dashboard Dojo. And for the summer, I just thought to go down to once a month for the dojo. So hopefully you guys have some vacation time coming up. But any other questions for Ezra? And thank you, Kyle, for putting those links in the chat. So Ezra, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. Can't believe all these years have passed since we were hanging out in high school. So Ezra, I'd love to see you present at Dreamforce again. Maybe we can twist your arm and get you out there.
Yes. You realize that twist my arm is an anagram of smarmy twit?
I did not know that. Oh,
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you very, very much, Kyle. Thank you, Ezra, for joining us. Really been a pleasure.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay. Hope to see everyone in the next Dashboard Dojo.